The Midwest has its own set of rules. Now, you have to understand, this is a place where people have had tons of UFO encounters, tons of Bigfoot sightings. There are a lot of strange things that happen in the Midwest. Now, the first rule of the Midwest is that you never go into a cornfield alone, and you never go into a cornfield at night because there are things that hide in those cornfields. And sometimes people go in there and they don't come out. The second rule is that at night, you will hear things in your yard, in your field, out in the cornfield, and you ignore it. You go inside. You do not acknowledge what you hear outside at night in the Midwest. Now, the third rule, if you see a black cat, walk the other way. Do not cross its path because it's considered to be very bad luck. The fourth rule of the Midwest, if you are driving, if you go outside at night and you see lights in the sky, you do not interact with them. You get away from them. You go inside, you lock the door because there have been so many cases of alien abduction that have happened in the Midwest. Now, the fifth most important rule of the Midwest is that if you go out at night, make sure it's not a full moon. Because when a full moon comes out in the Midwest, crazy stuff happens. Now, this particular story comes out of Illinois. There was this young man named John. John said when he was younger, he grew up on a farm. And he said, they had a bunch of chickens. And at the time, they were struggling to get by. These chickens were basically their source of food. So one day, they hear a knock at the front door. And it's this little old lady. The dad goes to the door and starts talking to this woman. She goes on to say, "Can I buy some of your chickens?" Well, the dad says, "Hey, I can't sell you any of these chickens because this is what I use to feed my family." The lady continues and insists, "Sell me some chickens, sell me some chickens." And the father refuses. So she gets angry and she says, "You will regret this. I promise you. You wait and see." And then she walks away with this smile on her face. So later that night, John goes to bed and he said he was awoken in the middle of the night to his dad running in his room saying, wake up, John." And he hands him a rifle. Now, usually when his dad had done this in the past, it was because there were coyotes and they basically had to fight them off and keep them away from the chickens. But when he asked his dad, should I go outside and start looking out for coyotes? His dad says, "No, I want you to go in the bedroom with your mom and your brothers and sisters and you keep them safe. You don't let anything come through that front door." So he thinks, okay, that's strange. His dad then proceeds to go outside. He goes in the bedroom with his mom and his brother and sisters. So they start hearing these, shots going off and they hear screaming. And after about an hour, the father does not return. So John's starting to get kind of worried, like maybe something happened to him. All of a sudden, he hears boom, boom, boom. There's someone knocking at the door. So he proceeds to go down to the front door. He goes to the window on the side and he looks out. And he said standing there right in front of the door was that old woman, except now she was taller. She looked younger and something seemed off about her. And as he looked her down closely, he could see that her hands were not hands. They were like these dog-like paws. And she sees him looking out the window and goes, "Hey, let me in, let me in." And he said he started to feel like something was, pushing him to open the front door. But then he realized what was going on and he yells out the window, "Go away, leave now." And she goes, "Come on, just let me in, just let me in." So he takes his rifle and he aims it at her. She jumps off the porch and she takes off running into the cornfield. Well, he goes outside and starts yelling for his father. He finds him by the chicken coop. He was attacked by something and he's in very bad shape. So he gets his dad to the doctors, and after that his dad was all right. But still to this day, he has no idea what it was that came after them. There was this man named Jimmy, lived in British Columbia. He said that him, his wife, and his son, they moved into this beautiful home that was situated along the forest. And he said, they'd lived there about a year. Nothing really strange had happened until one night he hears this banging on his door. And he goes and he answers the front door. He said it was his neighbor down the road, Eldridge. And Eldridge said, "Can you give me some food? I've been trapped outside for 3 days. Something is following me. I haven't been able to eat. Please let me inside." So he lets Eldridge in the house and he gives him some food. And he said after he scarfed down all this food, he starts talking to Eldridge. And Eldridge said he was outside his house doing some work when he said he's seen several of these very large men who were covered in fur. And he said they proceeded to chase after him and chased him through the forest and began stalking him. And he couldn't get back to his house. And he somehow managed to come out to their place. And it had been 3 days since he'd eaten or slept. So they call the Mounties come and they get, eldritch situated and everything. Well, he said about 6-7 weeks after this had happened, his son wakes up one night screaming. And they run to his bedroom, and the son's like, there's a monster in my closet, a monster in my closet. And at this time, Jimmy's just thinking, this is a kid with an overactive imagination. He's probably just, having bad dreams. This went on for like several weeks and stuff, and they couldn't figure out like what he was talking about, a man in his closet. And he said the other weird thing is, from time to time, he'd get up in the morning and he'd find that the front door was wide open. So part of him started to think, like, is someone sneaking inside the house at night? So Jimmy decides to have his son sleep in his room with the mother, and he will sleep in the boys' room that night. So he goes to bed, and, after a couple hours of sleeping, he said he woke up. It was probably like 1 a.m, and he hears, like the closet door opening. And he said, as he looked in the closet door, he could see the outline of something very large and 2 yellow eyes just staring at him. And he said he just kind of jumped up, he yelled, and whatever this was, he said it ran out of the room, down the hallway, and out the front door. And he said after that, he decided like to take his family and like go somewhere else. And he said they ended up moving back to Vancouver because they were so terrified by what had happened. This next story actually comes out of Toronto. There was this guy named Jordan, and Jordan said that him and his girlfriend for some time lived in this apartment. And he said one of the things that they would often do is make this loud whistling sound as kind of like a joke they had of calling each other. And he said this one night they were making the sound back and forth and like joking around. They decided to go to the bedroom, and they both lay down. Well, he said they made the sound a couple more times, and then they fell asleep. They wake up at 3:30 in the morning, and they start hearing the same exact sound coming from the living room. And Jordan's kind of like, is someone in the house? Like, is this an intruder? So he gets up, he searches the entire house. There's absolutely no one there. And he said another time, him and his girlfriend were in the bedroom, and they were sleeping. They both woke up. It was 3:30 in the morning. And they said the closet door just swung open, and they hear this loud scream that sounded exactly like his girlfriend, except she was right next to him. But he said the scariest thing that happened is him and his girlfriend went to bed one night, and he wakes up to his girlfriend saying, like, get up, you got to leave right now. You got to go. You're going to be late for work. And so he said he jumped out of bed and got ready real fast. And then he went into the kitchen to grab like his work bag. And then he realized it was 3:30 in the morning. Like, it wasn't time for work. So he's like, what is she doing? Why is she waking me up? He goes back to the bedroom. She is sound asleep. He wakes her up and is like, hey, why did you wake me up and tell me it's time for work? She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I've been asleep this whole time. And he said, he could tell that she wasn't like messing with him. And he said after that, they lived there a few more weeks, but it always scared him because it sounded exactly like his girlfriend. Louisiana is a spooky place. At nighttime, I will not go out because there's a lot of creepy supernatural stuff that happens in New Orleans. Now, there's this woman named Sarah. Sarah said that she and her friends were down at the French Quarter. She said this one night they go to this bar, and they're over in the corner just talking, having a good time. All of a sudden, this man walks through the door, and he's dressed really nice. He's got this cape on. She said he was just this beautiful, immaculate-looking person. And he just walked over by the bar and just stood there. And the whole night, her friends are talking to her, and everybody's dancing and having a good time, but she could not take her eyes off this man. And she felt almost like she was in this trance. After about an hour, she gets this feeling she should go over and talk to him. So she walks over to where he's standing. She goes, hi, I'm Sarah. The man just turns. He walks out the front door. And she feels compelled to follow him. So she walks out behind him. And he goes out around the corner into the alley. And he goes back a ways. So she gets back there to where he's at. And she goes, what are you doing out here? Why are you outside? And this man turns and he grabs her by the shoulders and pushes her up against the wall. And he begins to try and go for her neck like he's getting ready to bite her. But then she hears her friends screaming her name. And when she looks, the man is gone. So she runs over to her friends and she's, in tears. And she goes, the man, he was going to get me. Like, I don't know who he was. And her friends were like, wait a second. What man? We seen you in the bar. You were talking to someone that wasn't there. You walked out of the bar by yourself and you went into the alley. And she swore up and down that she had seen this man. And for weeks, she could not get him out of her head. Now, New Orleans has also been a hotspot for paranormal activity, especially after the hurricanes hit. And shortly after Hurricane Katrina, there were a lot of strange things that happened. There was this older woman. She said she lived in the area close to where these dams had broken and Lake Pontchartrain leaked into the city. She said one night she was cooking dinner and she hears a knock at the front door. She goes to the front door, she answers it, and there's this small young girl in a purple dress, and she is completely wet, soaked in mud, and she's like, "Please, can you help me? I'm cold." And the woman said, "Absolutely, child, like come inside." So she brings this girl inside and she sits her on the couch. She runs to go get her phone to call the police. But when she comes back to the living room, the girl is gone. She almost thought for a second that she had just imagined this until she's seen these wet, muddy footprints leading from the porch to the couch. So, what do you think? Is New Orleans a creepy place? Anyone else notice that time has been speeding up? Like just the other day, I didn't even realize that it was Christmas in a couple days because to me, it still feels like it's October. And over the past, I would say 6 to 7 years, time has been moving really, really fast. And I know people say as you get older that you experience time differently, but this just doesn't seem right. Like even older people are saying like time seems like it's moving faster than it did before. So the question is, what is going on? Like what is happening that we're experiencing time differently? Now, there's a story I heard about something called a time slip. It's where you can't account for periods of time or time moves differently. There was this man named Jacob. Jacob said that him and his friends, they went camping this one weekend in the Pacific Northwest. And he said they had set up their campsite and they had made this very large fire. And him and two other friends, they decided to go into town to get some supplies. So they leave their other friends around the campsite. So they get in the vehicle and they drive into town and they stop off at this general store and they get some supplies and they get back in the truck. But when they get back to the campsite, they're shocked to see that this very huge fire that they built is just now coals. It is burnt down to the ground. And they said, we couldn't have been gone that long. Like, how did the fire burn out so fast? Well, the other weird thing is that all of their friends were gone from the campsite. So they get out of the car and they start looking for their friends, yelling their names. And then finally they hear them and they find them. And their friends are like, "Oh my goodness, like we were wondering what happened to you because like you guys have been gone all night long." And they said, "No, we've only been gone for 45 minutes." And for some reason, that 45-minute trip to the grocery store was like several hours. And they could not figure out what had happened in that time from them going to the grocery store and coming back to the campsite.